And we are indeed live, it seems. Nice. Hello, everyone, Effect enjoyers, Effect lovers. How's it going? How are we going? Who's here today? Let's see. As you may seen, today we are not joined by Maxwell. As we said last time, today you're all alone with me, and let's see how it goes. Let's wait a few minutes for people to tune in. Hello, Damabat. Hope I pronounce it well. I don't know. Ooh, I need to change one setting from Riverside. Gonna go offline for a second and gonna be back. Good day. How's everyone going? We should be back. Okay, we should be live. Are we live? Yes, I think so. Just waiting for confirmation that I am back online. Okay, so let's see. So let's see together what we can deal with today. So have you all had a great week? How's everyone? Oh, welcome back. Fifth. I don't remember the pronunciation every time. Oh, welcome back to Arn Jensen as well. How's everyone going? So have you shipped Effect beta stuff in production last week? I hope so, because I did. So I hope you did as well. So as always, as I've prompted through the Effect Office, our Discord channel, as always, we are open for questions. If there is some code snippets, some gist, or some repo that you want us to go through, I am more than happy to have a look at it and see and discuss with you. And if you have a question, maybe we can go through them. And if not, maybe we can do something similar, something good to show. Oh, we have our first question. Let me just arrange my windows for a second. Let me do quite a few window management, and then I'll start replying your questions. So let me check. Yes. Okay, so it seems that we are starting to have some questions. So let me see. Let me start from a few of them. So, Kaiser, hope I pronounced it correct, asked, one difficulty I often run into when writing effect is that hype overs and error overs can feel pretty cryptic and noisy. And sometimes I just want to see what an FN takes over it, so much going on. And so let's see, maybe I can share my screen with a repository. Let me just check. Yes, hello. Okay, so one thing that you can use in order to get better content for your overs is the Effect LSP, which is something I have worked on. And one of the features of the Effect LSP, let me share the screen first. Share screen, entire screen, this screen, share. Okay, so one thing that you can use for that is the Effect language service, which is available both for TypeScript Go, if you are already using TypeScript Go, or you can use the classic Effect language service. And one of the features that the language service provides over the other functions that they provide is the fact that you can hover any effect type or yield star in an Effect.gen, and you'll get a prettier print of the types parameter of your effect. So let me zoom in first. Let me see if we can, yes. Is that enough? Is that good enough screen size wise? And so let me check if we have a project we can use to show that off. So let me share, let me see if we can increase my font size so I can show it live in an editor. Okay, so this is my project with DLF Effect LSP enabled. And as you can see in here, you already get better reading of your types because automatically what the Effect LSP does is whenever you have something that is an effect, you automatically get this hover that also shows in clean separate types the success, the failure, and the requirement channel. And this is usually useful because, first of all, that is not truncated. And so that not being truncated means that you see, for example, all of the errors that can happen. And also it helps in cases the one you mentioned where you have maybe a complex type or something that is a result of a call, and then it is usually hidden by the signature, but thanks to the Effect LSP, you can see all of that. And again, there is a guide over the Effect language service repository and also the TypeScript Go version to get started with it. But behind the scene, it's really simple. What you need to do is just to run for the Go version npx effect TSGo setup, and that will go through an automated setup that will perform the installation steps you need in order to get it running. So hope that feature helps you, and also hope that I answered your question. So as a follow-up, is this mostly a skill issues? I'm not familiar enough with the patterns yet, or is this a real DX problem with early type libraries with Effect? Well, as you can see, and as I've shown, that is basically due to how the library is well typed. And in order to make that hover more meaningful, the LSP helps by extracting the domain meanings of your type and show them right alongside of your type. And I have to explain one of my friends the effect, like simplest explanation or example to blow their mind. So this is a question that we often get. How can I basically present to someone effect, and how we can um, leverage things that can be show off from effect from one user that comes from plain TypeScript and we want to explain the values of effect. Well, I would say that there are different approaches to that, and the different approaches basically take different parts of effect based on what's the purpose of your application. For example, things like type safety, type error channel, to me, they are sure a good part of effect, but they are not the only reason for why one should adopt effect. One, for example, should adopt effect because, for example, it has built-in telemetry primitives. And I challenge you to write a full front-end to back-end application with full telemetry working, and you'll see that remembering to connect the telemetry and also to provide and instrument correctly your application is a non-trivial task, because again, you have to do a lot of things. And let me just see. Oh, sorry. I am sharing only my screen, right? Yes, indeed. Let me change for a second. I'm sorry, today I'm having issues managing my setup. Stop in here, layout, and I want this one. Okay. And so I was saying that one of the things that you can say, for example, is that Effect has built-in telemetry. And for some systems, knowing why they failed is very important. So telemetry is one of the important features of Effect that I would highlight to someone when discussing about why to adopt Effect. And there are also other things that I consider Effect to solve that are missing in the bare plain TypeScript promise word. For example, we know that promise has a lot of issues because, again, the promises, for example, represent something that is already running. So you cannot, for example, easily implement retries or implement interruption patterns over promises. And Effect make that really, 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 really easy, because you just add a combinator and that's it. You specify how you can interrupt, how you can coordinate your effects, your running things. And one thing that I always challenge people to ask is, do you properly handle things like a board controller in your APIs or in your front end or in whatever? Well, if you are not sure about the reply to that question, well, probably you'll be glad to hear that Effect behind the scene handles, for example, interruption for you. You just need to specify how to compose interruption, and interruption is automatically propagated and composed for you. And this is again one thing that, for example, in this LLM era, where LLM tokens are very expensive, for example, if you have an API that behind the scene invokes some LLM task, maybe it's better to be conservative and be sure to properly interrupt the LLM task behind the scene, and Effect helps with that interruption. And again, most people think, yeah, but I am using a serverless environment where the environment gets shut down immediately after the request response to the HTTP endpoint or things like that. And well, sure, that's true, but that also means that you are basically, for example, dropping database connection as the API completes. And not properly cleaning up resources is something that degrades your performance, because again, properly cleaning up, for example, a database connection is definitely better, and in some cases even more performant than just letting that connection drop to the dead pool. And so another thing that I usually say that is Effect has explicit resource management thanks to its primitives, and that's really, really, really good for some use cases like that. I hope that this gives you some hints on how to basically present Effect to your colleagues, but I also would recommend you, there is a presentation that I did at Effect Milan last year, I think, maybe even before the last year, that you can find here in the Effect YouTube channel, which is basically an introduction to Effect and some of the values that Effect presents. So I recommend you to see this presentation, and there is also a few other very, very good presentation from Kit Langton explaining how Effect is built behind the scene, which is very useful also to understand how to start Effect. So hope I replied to your question. I got a question running to last week. I made my first logger, a colorized version of log-fmt after discovering Effect small number. Is there any particular reason why log level in logger dot option is of type log level and not severity? It seems like one of the log will never my special types all or none. We can look into that later because that I need to get more context about that part of the effect. But yeah, we could maybe look into that later on, or always is as if you don't have already opened an issue for that, we can show that. So let's also see in here. Okay. So another question we got in here is, for example, Baptiste Arno asked, is there any reason why we'd want to use something like Drizzle Effect over Effect SQL? Maybe let's pop over the chat in here. So we were asking about that. Let me zoom in maybe. Okay. So is there any particular reason why that's what we did before? Is there any reason why we would want to use something like Drizzle Effect over Effect SQL something? Well, that's something we have actually discussed last time. And basically the gist is that you need to understand that the Effect SQL family of packages are really just low-level drivers to perform queries over your database, whereas Drizzle is a full-blown ORM. And again, ORM and database drivers have basically different purposes and also different limitations based on the approach. For example, potentially with an ORM, you can completely forget about which is the database engine behind the scene and write only code in the ORM. And that's beneficial if you want your application to be able to swap database provider, and that's fine. But again, to do that, ORM makes some assumptions. For example, they don't leverage very specific database optimizations because, again, they need to stay and to be kind of generic. And so if you instead are looking to leverage some feature that's specific for your database, probably instead you want to look into the direct Effect SQL driver. And if you are using the beta from Drizzle Effect, their Drizzle Effect for beta before is now baked on top of Effect SQL. So that also explains you like the difference between the driver, which stays on a lower level, and the ORM, which stays on a higher level. And also usually ORMs have more complex features, like for example, diffing your database structure in order to reconcile it, handle migrations in particular ways, and etc., etc., etc. Whereas with Effect SQL, you don't find those features. The main core idea is basically just to provide you a way to run queries over your database. And then the only integration there is the integration with schema, because once you get back your data from your database, you then have to ensure that the contract from the database and your code is actually satisfied, because that's a boundary between your application and the external world. So the time system cannot provide you guarantees over what's there. And that's why there is modules in Effect, like for example, the SQL schema or whatever, that allows you basically to run a query and then convert the result into a schema parsed object. I think that, for example, I should have in here, for example, you can see that I have in here in my code, for example, some code that, let me check, is that in memory? Yes, that is in memory. So let me see if I have something else in here to show. Maybe we can look into the Effect code base to show you a few of the APIs that could be interesting for that. Let's say, for example, if we go Effect TS Effect small. If you look for example for SQL schema, let's go to the text examples, for example. You can see in here, for example, that maybe there is some example that's more real world. In here, for example, let's see in the GS docs. You can say that it's a small adapter between Effect schema and the SQL statement will build functions that accept the code request type by using my application code, encode it before calling executed, and then decodes unknown driver rows into the result schema. So basically, this is only doing the conversion between a schema you define and the SQL query you perform. So basically, it has methods like find all, find an empty, void, which runs a request, and those methods really just perform the query and then get back the raw result and then pass that into a schema, which validates that the result is correct. Eventually, the schema can also transform the result, but that's not an ORM. That's only just a layer around that. So let's see if we have other things. Max is at Effect Miami today, I think. I think so. If it's not today, it's tomorrow. So when is it recommended to create wrapper errors like wrapper errors cause defect versus having defined as wrapper error 1, 2, or 3? I'm doing both patterns and it's getting a bit messy. Yes, that is indeed something that it's not immediate to decide. There is no real rule of thumb. I would say that it's that or not, because I would say that this depends a lot on your domain. Because let me, maybe we can do an example over that in here with our ticket repo that we have in here. So we have this ticket repo, which basically is a service that has three methods: one create that creates a ticket, one list that lists the ticket in the system, and one that closes a ticket. And there could be, for example, cases where for now I may decide that, I could have a ticket repo error. And that means that the ticket service has encountered an error while performing, for example, the create operation. And so you would ask, well, what error could that be? Well, it could be an error, for example, due to the underlying SQL storage, or it could be an error because the schema encoding has failed, or it could be an error because maybe there was a business invariant that this ticket repo is failing with. So how can I basically decide when something should go into the error channel and something else should go in the cause of a wrapper error? One thing that I like to think about is, let's say that I expose in here an SQL error. Would that make sense? Yes. But if you think about it, in here we are defining a ticket repo service, and exposing in here an SQL error, it's basically leaking how behind the scene this ticket repo is implemented. So let's say that, for example, in our system, at some point, maybe we have different storages. We have a file-based storage and one that instead is based on SQL. Having SQL error in here, probably it's not good, because again, you are leaking how your method is implemented behind the scene. Whereas instead having in here a ticket repo error and having then class ticket repo error extends schema dot tagged error class with the cause being a schema schema dot defect, and we'll import schema. Whereas having something like this, where we have our ticket repo error, that sounds better indeed, because now you are basically hiding away behind an unknown that behind the scene an SQL error has happened. And I would say that that's the distinction where you should decide what to wrap and what not to wrap. For example, in here, in our ticket not found, I would say it could fail with ticket not found and ticket repo error, for example, because it could be that there is an error behind the scene on how the repo is implemented, and an error which is domain error of the ticket not found. And again, this is interesting only if you expect somewhere to have some way to recover from this error. Because if in your application there are no way to recover from this error, well, probably there is no need to just keep bubbling up that error. You can just fail with a defect in that case. So hope that that replies to your question. That is something that there is no rule of thumb. It's black or white. Again, I think it's something that depends on your business. It depends on if you expect that error to be handled or not. And basically that helps you decide. And also one other last pattern I would mention as well is that if you have errors you care about, for example, let's say that you wrap your you bubble this error into another service and you want to wrap this error. Maybe if that service is known to being baked by the ticket repo and you expect that also in the exposed contract, it's fine to use, instead of cause schema defect, you can use reason, and then you provide your error in here. So that way you can use the effect catch reason family of APIs in order to not only recover in case of ticket repo error, but you get also signal of which specific kind of error has happened in the error. So here it could be basically a schema union of error A and error B. Okay, hope that that replied to your question. So why would you use GPT 5.4 over 5.5? Because sometimes the servers for 5.5 are so busy that they keep failing, and so you fall back to 5.4 for sometimes. I've been using the TSGo LSP. It works perfectly. Glad to hear that. I'm really happy to hear that. And Kaser following up with thanks, we'll check it out. Nice. So it seems that the TSGo LSP works much better with v4 that v3. Does that sound correct? It shouldn't be the case because the Effect TSGo LSP should work with both v4 and v3. What's true is that thanks to the performance that we have in Go, we have some additional rules that are in there in the TSGo version that specifically targets only on Effect v4 because we have more performance now that we could port back to the old version, but it would be way slow, and it would make your basically your editor, compiler, and etc. performance so worse that it's not worth it. Given the feature is the TypeScript Go by Microsoft, everything I am doing is mostly on that for the new features, but I'll still backport whatever makes sense for v3. So if you encounter something that don't work for v3, please open an issue because either that's one of those things I mentioned before that I explicitly didn't add it in the old version, but usually that should not be the case. There should be almost feature parity with Effect v3 and Effect v4. So Speedywitz is saying, I'm dealing with non-effect code base right now. I'm dealing with an non-effect code base right now, and I would want to kill myself. Well, please stay with us. Don't leave us. But yeah, I feel once you adopt effect, once you get into the effect way to do things, it's really hard to get away from that. Yeah, no worries. Yeah, sure. I like to sell effect first by saying it is like the missing TypeScript library. It has nice stuff like daytime, duration, Lodash like helpers. Yes, that's also a valid point. One of the great things of Effect is its good ecosystem of data types that all feel and behave in the same way, which make one of the effects of Effect is that usually it reduces a lot your list of dependencies that you have in your application. But yes, Arnos, very clear. Thank you. You're welcome. So Effect is to plain JS what Rust is to PHP. Or is that too much of a stretch on the second comparison? Well, probably I would say that saying that Rust to PHP, yeah. But yeah, I like to say that TypeScript has been an improvement over JS, and I would like to say that Effect is an improvement over TS. Also, given all of the nice thing that Effect provides type level for your agents and whatever that again you don't get the same semantics in plain JavaScript or TypeScript code base. With Effect, you just hover some types and you already get some business values, some business meanings out of your objects without basically investing too much in that. Is Effect v4 basically blocked on TSGo release? Once that drops, Effect v4 drops? No. Effect as a library is not tied to the TypeScript Go release. So Effect v4 is not basically blocked. It's still going on, and we are right now in the phase of collecting beta feedbacks. And so if you have something that you are not happy with, or something that you find missing in Effect v4 compared to Effect v3, that's the moment to say, yeah, I'm missing this. I don't like how this is handled, because the more time passes, the more we are locking into some choices, and that's why we are basically waiting a little for moving on with Effect v4. Again, we want v4 to be a really stable release, a really long-term release. So that's also kind of why we are being, I would say, a little bit conservative about moving on with that. Thank you for the explanation on the errors. Makes total sense. I'm happy that that replied to your question. So speaking about errors, is there a rule of thumb for handling error in HTTP client services? I am working on a crawler indexer and have multiple HTTP clients and probably need to differentiate each error. Well, you already probably give yourself an hint of what I would do in your own question, because if you have different HTTP clients and every one of them is doing different jobs, basically it's hiding an HTTP client but doing different stuff or having different configurations, probably what you would need is either provide different services that basically just alias your HTTP client with different configurations, uh, or you should probably hide away your HTTP client entirely and create a service that performs your domain tasks and hides away the fact that behind the scene there is an HTTP client. Again, this is one of those use cases where probably you can have that error with a reason field, and the reason being the HTTP client error. But probably if you don't want to mismatch the errors and you want to differentiate between which client raise which error in which phase, probably it's good to wrap them and alias them behind some service. But again, unfortunately, I cannot give much on this question. I would like to need probably a GIST or something like that to understand more about what you are doing with those HTTP clients in order to give you like maybe a practical example of how I would structure it. That again, it could also be different from how you'll end up, but that's a suggestion. In our v4 branch, I can over effects and yield, and it shows type correctly, but it rarely does on our main v3 branch. So if that's the case, I would ask you to please open an issue where you provide just some snippets of code that type checks. It's still fine if you replace the actual implementation of function with just the declarations of the signatures, and that's really it, because that would help me to understand what's going on regarding this feature. Can you elaborate? Yeah. If you're familiar with, I want to make a typed client and I have to deal with schema errors of response errors, output and/or request parameters. It's a little hairy. So yeah, in here probably you want to hide away the fact that you are using an HTTP client behind the scene, because uh, probably I'm not too familiar with atproto, but probably you could even write something that uses behind the scene the structures used by Effect RPC to define your RPCs, um, if you want that type client. But yeah, because when you call HTTP client response schema body JSON, it can return an HTTP client error or your schema error, and that's where you should probably map those into your domain error. If I want to do property-based testing on Effect code bases, how should I approach it? So to do property-based testing, what you can leverage is using the effect schema, which allows you to do property-based generations of structures. And you can use, let me check, let me bring it up on the screen. In here, we can go in small. We have some effect vitals that this integration, if I recall correctly, also provides some utilities to perform tests with property-based. Yes. You can see that you can do with, for example, it.effect.prop, you can define schemas, or you can define, you can provide a fast check, which could be also derived from an effect schema, and then you can have your test implementation be out of that properties that you have defined before. So I'm not sure if that's what you wanted to ask, but hope that this helps. So, following on the previous discussion, I have my HTTP client that extends HTTP client, and while internally it has shit of things, I also have static my HTTP client that executes the request and wraps it with the correct error. I'm not a big fan of having a service that extends another service, because first, providing this service, if that extends this one, will also erase at type level the dependency of HTTP client, and that's not true, because at runtime instead you are not erasing it. And again, it is more what I usually I prefer is composition over inheritance. So probably again, having an entire HTTP client and adding features on top of them, of that, probably sounds like something where you need to split your service and have maybe your service provide only the additional function and then also provide an accessor to the underlying HTTP client if you really want to access that behind the scene. So here's a gist. Usually the URL we post in here don't survive due to our due to how YouTube bans the URL. So please post your GIST URL in our Effect Discord channel. So that way we can see that, you can see more of that in there. Can you explain optics and why one should use them? Well, probably I'm not the best person to answer that question. Giulio is very good at explaining optics, but maybe let's first finish this journey we have about this GIST and the HTTP client, and then maybe we can go back to that question. Let me see. So this seems that it is self-runnable, so I can just copy it, and we can maybe atproto. That was the name, right? And the other one was atproto, and that one xrpc.ts. Okay, atproto xrpc.ts. Okay. Yeah, we have some errors because we are on a older Effect version, I think, but we should be able to fix that pretty quickly. Okay. Okay. So let's see what we have in here. Check for hidden Unicode IE prompt injection in untrusted Gits. Yes. Yes, indeed. So let's see. So in here, you have basically your codex. You have a dit, which is basically a branded string from what I understand. And then we have handle, which is again a branded string with a specific pattern and a SID, and so goes on. Okay, so we have defined some patterns, and then we have xrpc. And xrpc defines first error response, which is a schema class, as an error and a message. And then we have a response error, which has an error and reason. That's not of type schema, I suppose, because of the HTTP client error. And this parse error, I would imagine, is an error that wraps the parsing of either the params, the output of the error, there's the underlying schema and the client error, and HTTP client response, okay, and xrpc client error. Okay, and then you have your xrpc client, which basically is an xrpc client context service, okay, and the service that then constructs back some pre-configured HTTP client with some mapping, some retries. Then you have a layer client. Then you have a make query that basically takes in the ID that we have defined before, some codec that converts given params to an URL and output into JSON. Then we have some annotations. I'm not clear to me what these annotations do, but again, probably it's because I'm not too familiar with the syntax. Also, please adopt Effect.gen, please. I know that some people like the flat style, but yeah, in here, probably an Effect.gen would help a lot. So basically, we start with the params, we encode them, and that also maybe connects to also one of the reasons why it gets fiddly for you to handle the errors. Basically, here you are encoding the params, and then you map that error into a parse error for the params, and then you create a GET request. You use that over execute. You catch the HTTP client error with fail error.reason catch tag. This HTTP client error status code error, I think that is basically a catch reason. HTTP parse error. What was it? Sorry. HTTP client error status code error. So that could be an HTTP client error status code error. Yeah, see, this helps because you were before just refailing the error just to satisfy the pipe, and with catch reason you can rewrite the same, unwrapping just the reason, and then you get the reason. You start from the reason. Also, yeah, I'm sorry about, I mean, why would you even in the first place reason dot what was it? Reason dot response. Okay. You're basically starting with this, right? Or which could be even this. Bro has OCD, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's indeed the case. I have OCD indeed. Yeah. When I see things like that, I have to change the style. Yeah. Map error, then you map this error into a parse error again. You annotate that, and then you flat map that into a response error. I mean, the issue in here, not the issue, the things that I would improve in here, probably it's not even much about the error shape. It's more like the pipe handling, probably. Yeah. Because again, I think that this could be easier to manage either by using some effect generators, which could give you away with all of these flat map, top, annotate logs, map error, map error, not sorry, map. Yeah, you could probably get something, but overall, I don't see many issues about the way the errors are structured. Yeah, probably I would just change that, because the error structure is not bad. I would probably give a better name to parse error, because it's not probably a parse error, and it has the same type of error that's embedded inside of a schema error, and could be maybe like misunderstood for that. But yeah, I would say that that's not too many an issue with your error structure. It's more probably an issue on how I would say that you are making it more complicated for you by writing that in a pipe style instead of an Effect.gen, I would say. But again, that's my style. That's not probably the issue. I'm not sure if this helps, but there are probably also some things like catch reason that we have seen before that could also be used in order to improve the readability and how these um, basically flows. Um, for example, in here you also have tap error, and I think there is tap. There is like both. You can match probably instead of tapping, and that's it. Yeah. Or you can even say something like on exit, and then based on the exit, say if the query has succeeded or if it has failed or interrupted or whatever. But yeah. They just want to bill you to pay per yield generators. Yes. We will launch soon our pay per yield. So yeah, please yield as much as you can. So once we go on a pay per yield plan, we will make a lot of yield. Yes, that's indeed the case. Hey, Mattia, what did we miss? Well, we were discussing a few things we were going on, an example, and then I would say that this error structure again is probably fine. Probably it's getting hard to do because again, you are probably handling these as a single flow, and the thing is that unfortunately reality is not a single flow. Even Effect itself has a split of binary. Something goes well, something goes wrong, and then in this case, for example, you have attempts of recovery or things that should be done on the error case. So probably all of this is not properly expressing all of those things that are happening behind the scene. I'm just trying to save a couple of bucks. Yeah, that's indeed the case. Yeah. Um, I'm sorry that probably you expected like more a golden solution, but I would say that the error structure is fine. I mean, from what I grasp of the domain of the problem, it is fine. Again, probably I would give more meaningful names to the error, but that's my personal taste because again, response error. Maybe it's more an xrpc response error or something like that, just to understand better what kind of response error or parse error we are dealing with. But the flow of the code is fine. It's written in pipe style, which for flows like that, I don't like much. But that's my personal taste. It's not something wrong with the code, I would say. There was one tweet recently that I think it was Dylan Murray who did it. Yeah, Murray, let me check it. That basically said something about the style of writing your Effect.gens. There it is. Let me show it on screen. This exactly matches what the style that usually I use as well. I have Effect.gen or Effect.fn for if that's the case, and then I have first my business logic, and then I leave compositions patterns in the pipe that's after or the arguments for the Effect.fn. So, for example, going back to your code, I see initially that you have a long flow that is actually encoding different steps. So probably the first thing I would like split those different steps, maybe in something smaller, and then, because again, this is just encoding the params and failing with an error. So this could be something like a const itself that is performing just this task, and then you can have basically an Effect.gen that invokes that part of the code that you have extracted away, and then at the end you pipe and you add things like, for example, the spans, the scoped, you annotate the logs, and probably you also add things like this matching on the error to print if the query succeeded or failed. It was Nylon, yeah, it was Nylon, yeah. I really enjoy that style. It was about that, but that's exactly one of the way I think about them. Usually I have business logic, and then I have things that add on top of the business logic, like telemetry, mapping errors into specific kind of errors for the entire workflow, or things like, as you have in here, logging success or failure, or things like that. Let me also check. Um, Let me also check if we don't have any questions on the Discord channel. We don't right now. Okay, so going back to our chat in here. That makes sense. Pipe has 5% performance gain. No, that's not actually the case. Because if you have a long enough pipe with combinators that just map, or for example, you had in here a map in here, or you had a flat map, or things like that, you are basically through those operators, you are emulating, let's say, a JavaScript scope. And that means that every time you do a flat map, you are basically performing new instructions over the effect runtime. Whereas when you do something like, and then the const a equals yield 1, and then you say const b equals yield star. Let's say that we have this very simple program. Whereas instead you are doing this, for those operations like mapping and fat mapping, we are basically leveraging the generators and the JavaScript native scopes. And turns out that it's not actually the generators that are slow. Generators are nice, are good. The thing that is slow is allocating generators. So the thing is that probably allocating doing something like this, is probably bad, because every time you invoke this function, you are allocating a new generator, and that's why Effect has effect.fn. So with effect.fn, you basically have the same program, but this time your generator is allocated only once when your function is defined. So basically you get a way that instead of paying the cost for allocating the generator each time, you basically allocate the generator only every time you define a function, which should ideally be only once. But for some reason, I'm scared of helpers that only get used once. But it would probably make it cleaner. That's my point. You should not be too scared of that, because again, having that 3 instruction in a row in a flow that's made up of like 40 operators, one after the other, by just looking at these and scrolling up and down, it's really hard to understand what's going on. Whereas if you had instead something like, let's say, we had pipe, and we say convert params, effect flat map, perform request, clean up logs, or maybe print Excel. I would say that this reads way better than these, because you don't have to read the entire flow to grasp what's going on. You first understand the business logic, which is that function basically is converting parameters, performing a request, and then doing something when it exits. And then if you're interested about the actual implementation of something like convert params, that's fine. You jump into the definition of that and you're fine. Let me drink a little. And so to update dependencies in packages.json does not pick up certain changes to effect packages. 49 to 71. Yeah, that's a known issue that package managers have with beta releases, in the way that the beta number is structured. Unfortunately, there isn't much we can do about that. It's actually one issue on the side of the package managers. I also don't like naming things, so pipe helps me not to have to do that as much. Yeah. Naming things is hard, but if you gave, you know what's even better? Being able to just hover something and see the types. And if you have things like convert params, and you are not properly sure if the name is conveying what it's doing, one thing or effect, you can over its type, and the type can tell you that this succeeds with the type, can fail with the schema error, type conversion error, etc. And so you are not just relying on the name, you are also relying on the types that the hover can provide. I've sent you 49 of code for judging against Effect.gen versus pipe discussion. Let's see. Talks on code below. Let's see. Let's share it in here. Talks on the code below regarding Effect.gen versus pipe discussion. The idea is to have a single line of code that reads something from the DB and the code sit with the schema without needing intermediate variables. So in here, I can copy this into a file maybe just to see it bigger in my editor. Yeah. Okay, we need effect, we need option, I've seen, and schema layer, and that's it, right? The other one I could not have. Okay. undefined or okay. So regarding this, you have a make, which I think it's a make for a layer, for constructing a layer in a effectful way, right? Is that correct? Let me just pop down the chart. And then you have these. That is a chainable API, so that's fine. If option is non-binding, then you do that error, not found error. Otherwise, you return the binding. Well, to be honest, this is one of those edge cases where, from how it's written in here, this could be really just could be also be written as a single function, even without having flat map or whatever, because there is actually no need of that, because this is already an effect which returns an effect that has our database error. In case this fail, and then you do undefined. See, in here you do what's not clicking for me is that in here you are basically taking the result, if I get correctly, and then you match the result. If it's undefined, you succeed with none, and if it's defined, then you attempt to decode. Okay, and so I would say that probably succeeding with none in here is not necessary, because you are already flat mapping, so you can return this error in here directly, and that gets away of that. And if you have this flat map, you, in case nothing is found, then you fail with your error, and in case something is found, then you don't have to do a sum anymore. You can just decode, and that's it. So that means that there is no binding anymore, and so there is no need of doing that anymore. And so that means that probably, given this function only has one yield, you can basically have this as a single pipeline. That would be my point. You are, I would say that probably you are over wrapping things, because again, you had something that was undefined, and instead of failing first because you got something undefined, you decided to go with none for them, but then that none wasn't used for anything. It would have made sense if you had, for example, let's say that you perform this query and then you get back an option with either value or nothing, and then maybe you get or else that, or else you succeed with other thing. That could have been one reason to have the option, because maybe then you compose with another option. But given you were using the option just to decide if you wanted to throw the error or not, probably I would not say that. I would not use option. And then again, given you are using fn untraced, so that means that you are not capturing the tracing at call side of the telemetry that effect.fn instead gives you. Then you can again remove this entire generator, because again, it's yielding only one thing, and so you can just have the bare account ID function that takes that and goes there. Probably would be my guess. And one last thing, but that's probably that's probably more something I prefer stylistically. So it's not something you should do, unless you're okay with that. Is that, for example, if you look at these, you are basically mapping the error in here, but then this error is not recatched or handled in any way after. So probably we could leave, this is more a style of how I like to write the code, and you could probably just leave that error be bubbled up and then map the error in here. But then one would say, yes, but now this error would be wrapped as well. And that's why, when probably I would use instead some catch tag of my potential error that is being raised by this. Let's say it's query error, and probably you could remap that in here, so that you can basically do also things like this fails with a schema error. So you can say also, instead of catch tag, you can say catch tags, and you can say when you have a query error, you convert that into that. And when you have a schema error, you just say effect or die, and that's it. So that way I have basically moved almost at the end the handling of the error. But again, that's more like how I prefer to write the style. I'll prefer to handle the errors as late as possible rather than as soon as possible. And handling the errors also means mapping the errors, because mapping the errors is effectively one way of handling the errors. You are taking an error and converting into another one. And that's one way I would I would do that. Yes. Then that's so clean. Yeah. It's not easy, but once you get to grasp, it starts clicking how you can simplify that. The idea to have effect map error before effect map is to ensure if anything changes on Drizzle side, the error will still be coded as database error. Well, you could do the same because, for example, if you say that you're in here, you're just interested in our Fireblocks account error and your other error, which is the schema error, you can also use the or else parameter that's in here. And this or else parameter in here basically gets applied to any other type of errors. And so you are basically saying, yeah, when a schema error happens, I want to or die. And for every other error, I wrap that into a cause. And probably things like our Fireblocks account error, I want to keep that as is with an identity. Again, that's a style. That's not the correct, there is not a correct and a not correct way to do that, but I like these because I like basically to see the error handling at the end, or at late as possible, as I would do that. But I get that someone would say, wait, what's happening in here? Again, that's a style. Even the solution with the map error in before is fine. It's just something that I like to have the error handling at the end. Let me see if we have something else on there. No. So I've seen before there was a question: what do you think of wide events in logging and traceability? Well, they have sometimes sense, and sometimes probably they are an overkill, because again, logging too much and logging nothing probably have the same issues. because when you have too much data, then finding things that happened becomes difficult. So it kind of becomes the same that if you don't had that data at first. But yeah, if you have a system that then collects your log and let you filter your logs, like you store the logs in Loki and then with Grafana you query them, that probably makes sense. Very interesting style, thanks. I hope that this was interesting for you. Again, that's a style. That's not something that you should do that, and if you don't do that, that's not correct, effect speaking. But it's a style that I like, to try to put things and the handling as late as possible. And again, one thing that I really like to do is this explicit type of schema error and then saying effect or die, and that's fine. Mattia the goat, yeah. I'm a goat. Time to spend the next 2 days on refactors. Indeed. There is this meme. There is this meme I really like. Opening a new window. Yeah. This meme I really like. I have big plans for this code. Please no more refactors. Big plans. Yeah, that is exactly how I read your comment. Okay, let me get back to the chat. So effect subtyping is back. Yeah, effect subtyping is back. I think we already have discussed that in a recent stream, if I recall correctly. But basically, we removed the yieldability and we basically had back the subtyping, but this time the subtyping is more strict. We are now not just having subtyping just because it's fancy to have. We now have subtyping only where it actually makes sense and only where there is a clear meaning of what that type would mean. For example, if you check, if you check things like the fibers, for example, and we go into the fiber definition, the fiber is not an effect subtype. It's not an effect subtype because, again, in effect v3 you could have yielded fibers, but it's not clear what's the meaning of yielding a fiber. Are you forking that? Are you joining that? Are you awaiting that? What's the meaning when you, for example, yield a fiber? And that does not make a lot of sense. So that's why in v4 fiber is no more a subtype of an effect. But for example, if we look into, give me a second so I could open the effect source code just to show you in here. So we can show all the types that have survived the subtyping. In here. Yep. Okay, if we zoom in, zoom in. Okay, and if we check extends effect dot. For example, you can see that exit still extends and subtypes effect. We also have still things like where it is affectable prototype, find the references. We still have things like, for example, a child process effect, subtypes effect, because then when you have things like a child process description, yielding that describes basically as spawning, that's a process, or in things like effect workflows, yielding the effect of one activity basically means executing that activity inside of workflow definition. So evaluate basically runs I'm sorry, runs the execution, or things like, for example, yielding an effect context, mean an effect context service tag, or means basically just attempting to get the value of that service. So things that where it makes clear sense are still effect subtypes, and we opted out to of yieldability instead, and because it was not great for things like workflows and other primitives where you still had to write a lot of dot as effect in order to convert whatever you had into an effect. And instead, we did also a pass over the APIs to ensure that there are no APIs that implicitly, without you doing that explicitly, flatten things, so that there is no risk that weird error channel or weird things happen without you explicitly call things like flatten, etc. I should have that image as a poster. Yeah, I really like that meme. After the 24-hour cluster stream, I'll bet I'll spend a month refactoring the code. Well, again, we are down to, I would say, 14-hour stream, right? Are we discounting the hours as effect office hours passes, right? That's how it works, right? Is there a clip? I don't recall if there's a clip. I don't actually recall if it has been discussed. I think so. But lately my memory is joking with me, so sometimes I recall things that didn't happen. So I'll double check that after the stream ends and post over the office hour channel the link if I find that again. Okay. So do we have other is there a comprehensive list of which types are subtypes of effect? I don't think right now, because again, we are moving with the beta, so things change. But I don't think that we have one. The way I usually look for that again is just by watching everything that extends the effectable prototype or the effectable class. Those are the two primitives that basically are used even internally, as you can see, to define new effect subtypes. And this gives you a good slice of the types that subtype effect. Okay. So do we have other questions right now? Let me see. Makes sense. I'll try updating soon. Yeah. Hope that the update goes well. And I think we were discussing today that probably we will at some point also make one update of what happened between the beta releases. But yeah. Oh, I had the optic question, but no rush. Sorry, I forgot about that question. So let me check it again. It's here, right? Optic. Can you explain optics and why one should use them? Well, I would say that if you go into, let me open it up. If you go into the effect small repository and you go into packages effect optic.md, it gives you basically packages effect optic.md. It gives you an overall of what an optic is and what's the purpose of an optic is. And basically, optic lets you focus on parts of immutable data structure to read and update them in a safe, composable ways. So basically, with optics, you are basically creating lenses. That's why it's called optic. There are other data types other than the lens, but the lens is one of them. That allows you, given a full data structure, to focus on a specific field, and you can then read that specific field from the entire data structure or construct a function that, given the optic, the entire data structure, and a new value for that specific optic lens, for example, it creates a new version of the full data structure with that specific field updated. So for example, let me show if we have in here. Yeah, you can see that in here, for example, we define first a structure, S, which has only a key A of type number, and then you create an optic identity that starts from S, and then you focus on the KE, and then this underscore A is basically just a function that, when called with a full structure, with A1, then returns you the value of just that value, that the field. And then it also gives you things like, for example, replace and modify that, as I said before, allows you to change the value at that specific lens, at that specific path, and create back a new copy of the entire immutable data structure with that updated. And this seems an overkill for probably just one field, but that becomes more useful when you have things like these, when you have structure that are very deeply nested, very particular, where you can have things like, I want to get the street name. Yeah, you start from an employee, you get its company, their address, the street, and the name. And then if you want, for example, to modify the street name and be sure that the street name is all capitalized, well, you can just say, take your optic and then say modify. The function that will transform your string, it will string.capitalize it, and then you call that from an initial structure, and then you will get back the updated structure, the updated data. For example, you can see in here that initially we had high street with the H being lowercase, and then after calling that, now it is uppercase. And then monocle TS is back. Yes, monocle TS was optics for FPTS, and now in effect there is built-in optics. And again, the basic usage is what you have seen. You can create with key, and then you can, for example, use, if a field is always present, use key. If the field is present, but you probably have cases where, when you want to drop that, if it's undefined, then you use optional key. If you have a field that's an union of different cases tagged by a tag, you could use tag to address a specific member of those ones. Or if you want to address a specific index of an array, you use at. Or if you want to basically target all of them, you use a combination of them. And there are also like other things, like, for example, let's say that you want to create optics that only get groups of things or omit some fields, where you can see in here that you can have function for those as well. An optional key in a structure table, that was one of the things that I wanted to show you. If you have a type S which has a field that's optional, in here it's optional, it's a number or undefined, you can first create a key that gets that, and that's a number of are undefined. And you can see that if you call get result with a1, you get a success, and if we call that with something that's not that key defined, we get undefined. And then if we use instead optional key, we can instead drop the or undefined we had before in that field. And now the optics library will treat the undefined as a way to say that field should not be there. And you can see that if we replace that field with undefined, it automatically gets erased from the object. And instead, if we provide a value, that field is set to the value we have provided. And then we have way more example. But again, I would recommend looking into this document. The only last thing that I would point out to is the fact that you can also derive optics automatically from schemas. So if you have a schema that defines, for example, struct with some fields and whatever, then you can basically automatically convert that schema to an ISO and then get keys for that. But also you can do that from class schema and whatever. And the thing is that you can focus on key, but then the great thing is that you can see in here that what we are building is an immutable person, basically a schema of type class that is a person, and we want to replace the name. And if you do that with a regular JavaScript spread, for example, what you get back, probably it's not the person, or it's like not correct. And the magic behind this schema to ISO implementation is that you basically replaces the value and then it constructs back the schema, the person structure. So that way it is a proper person structure with that. What is that underscore name pattern? Is that recommended? It is just a naming convention that Giulio, I think, adopted. And it's just to point out that this is a lens that points to the name field. But that's not something you must have, let's say. And the last thing I want to do is that also the optics that Effect schema has is integrated with produce from Immer. If we recall correctly, the last stream where we have spoken about FoldKit, for example, we mentioned that FoldKit used an album style architecture, and that means that your model needs to update in an immutable way, take in the old model and create a new model. And Immer is a way to basically, instead of spreading all of the way or using lenses, you basically call a function called produce. You start with a state and then you get a draft. You are free to modify in line the things imperatively inside of the draft function, and that has to be synchronous. And then it returns back a new copy of said state object that has that value modified. So basically, you write as if the object was mutable, but behind the scene, it is just recording the changes you are doing and then creating a new object with the same changes. And then, yeah, declarative versus manual handling of optional data. You can see in here, you can call produce, and it works. And that's really it. So I know this is a very fast look through what optics are, but hope that this explains the overall idea of the optic. Basically, the idea of the optic is, again, to have a compositional data structure that helps you focusing on part of an immutable data structure. I would say like that. Probably not the best correct definition. Again, Giulio would be better at explaining that. But that's the basic gist, I would say. It's something that, given an immutable data structure, allows you to focus on particular part of that structure and perform operations over that part of the structure by creating new copies of the original immutable data structure. Okay. So do we have other questions? Let's see. Let's see. I don't think we have other ones. Yes. I can close this one. I don't need anymore. And I think that we also have reached a good amount of time. So it has been, as always, a pleasure being with you. Hope that everyone will continue this amazing week. Hope that everything goes well. Hope that no one breaks something in production because that's not good. But that's fun what happens. So thank you everyone for joining up. And as always, we will be here again next week, next Wednesday, or next Wednesday Effect Day, as it has been named a few weeks ago. And well, that's really it. So thanks again for joining and see you next time. Bye, everyone.